Amara Bello had a way of moving through rooms that made her almost invisible, not because she tried to disappear, but because she had learned, over many years, that quiet was its own kind of armor. She mopped floors without splashing. She dusted shelves without rattling a single frame. She polished the long mahogany dining table until it shone like still water, and when she was done, she stepped back, looked at it once, and moved on to the next thing. 15 years. That was how long she had been coming through the back gate of Chief Adewale Johnson's estate every morning before the sun was fully awake. 15 years of marble floors and silver candlesticks, and heavy curtains that collected dust faster than anyone could shake them out. The other staff called the chief the king behind his back, and sometimes even to his face, because there was no other word that fit him quite as well. He had built his textile business from a single rented room and turned it into something that employed over 400 people at its peak. He walked like a man who had never once been told no. But he was 78 now, and the walk had slowed. Amara noticed these things. She noticed the way he held the staircase railing a little longer each morning. She noticed that he had started eating less, leaving half his breakfast on the plate in a way he never used to. She said nothing about any of it. It was not her place, and besides, the chief was not the kind of man who welcomed observation from the help. His children, Folake and Kunle, visited perhaps 4 times a year, and even then it was never really a visit, it was a performance. They arrived in expensive cars, kissed their father on both cheeks, spent 2 days talking about estate matters and investment accounts, and then left again, with the same energy as people catching a connecting flight. Amara had watched this happen over and over, and she had long since stopped being surprised by it. Her own life outside those gates was quieter and tighter. Her husband Samuel had died 11 years ago, a sudden thing, a heart attack at 41, that had made no sense to anyone who knew him. She had raised their son Toby on her salary from the estate, stretching it in ways that would have impressed an accountant. Toby was 24 now, a mechanic with skilled hands and a serious face, and his dream was to open his own repair shop. He had the name picked out already. He had even sketched a logo on a napkin once, and shown it to her. A little embarrassed by his own hope. She had kept that napkin. The problem was money. There was never quite enough of it to make the dream real. On the evening the storm came, Amara had almost gone home early. 2 other staff members had already left, and the head gardener, an older man named Festus, had told her the weather report was bad, and she should not stay. She had looked at the sky, seen the dark wall of clouds building in the west, and then remembered that the chief had asked her to prepare his evening medication tray before she left. So she stayed. By 7 o'clock, the rain had become something else entirely. It was not falling so much as attacking, and the wind had found every loose shutter on the house, and was making them speak in loud, irregular bangs. The power went out at 7:20. Amara lit the emergency candles in the kitchen, prepared the medication tray by their light, and was walking down the corridor toward the chief's reading room when she heard the sound. It was not a crash exactly. It was more like a heavy, uncontrolled settling, the sound of something large going down without meaning to. She moved quickly, pushed open the reading room door, and found Chief Adewale Johnson on the floor beside his armchair. One arm stretched out, his face turned to the side. The glass he had been holding had rolled under the chair. "Chief," she was at his side immediately, kneeling on the floor, her hand on his shoulder. "Chief, can you hear me?" He made a sound. His eyes were open but unsteady, moving in a way that frightened her. She had never felt panic quite like that before. A cold, clean fear that arrived all at once and then, strangely, sharpened her. She did not scream. She did not run in circles. She thought instead. She knew from a first aid course she had taken years ago, something the estate had organized for all staff, and which most of them had forgotten by the following month, that she should not move him. She remembered something about keeping a stroke patient still, about keeping the airway clear, about warmth. She pulled the throw blanket from the armchair and covered him carefully. She rolled a cushion and placed it gently beneath his head without lifting his neck. She ran to the window and looked outside, but the road was not a road anymore. It was a moving brown river, and the lights of the nearest house were gone. Her phone had 1 bar of signal that kept disappearing. She tried 3 times to call an ambulance and got nothing. She tried Festus and got a dead tone. She sent a text to Toby that said only, "Emergency at estate, need help. Road may be flooded. Please come, or send someone." Then she went back to the chief and sat on the floor beside him. "I'm here," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." He turned his eyes toward her. Something in them, beneath the fear and confusion, steadied slightly. "Just keep listening to my voice," she said. "You're going to be fine. You just have to stay with me." She talked to him for the next 4 hours. She talked about things she had never said out loud to anyone. She told him about Samuel and how she had managed after he died. She told him about Toby's napkin sketch, the logo for the shop that existed only on paper. She told him about the first day she had come to work at the estate, how nervous she had been, how she had broken a small decorative dish in the hallway and hidden it behind a vase for 3 weeks before confessing to the previous housekeeper. She told him about the bowl of pepper soup she made every Sunday, the one thing she cooked that she was unreasonably proud of. She was not sure how much he understood, but his breathing stayed even, and his eyes stayed open, and she kept talking. At some point around midnight, the rain softened. An hour later, Toby's headlights swept across the wall. He had come in the truck belonging to his friend Damala, who knew how to navigate flooded roads from years of living in a low-lying part of town. Together, Toby and Damola lifted the chief carefully and got him into the back seat. Amara sat with him, holding his hand, while Toby drove, and Damola kept the torch pointed at the road ahead. The hospital was 40 minutes away in good weather. That night it took nearly 2 hours. But they arrived. And when the doctors came and took over, and Amara finally sat down in a plastic waiting room chair and let her hands rest in her lap, she realized they were shaking. They had been shaking for hours. She simply had not allowed herself to notice until now. The chief was in the hospital for 3 weeks. He had suffered a mild stroke, the doctors said, but his recovery was good. His brain was unaffected. His speech came back fully within the first week. Folake and Kunle arrived on the second day, filling the corridor with anxious voices and questions about prognosis and rehabilitation plans, and then, by the end of the first week, Kunle had returned to his life abroad, and Folake was visiting every other day, instead of every day, and then every few days, and then calling, instead of coming. Amara visited every day during her lunch break. She brought the chief small things, a newspaper, a container of pepper soup, which the nurses allowed him to have after some negotiation, a paperback novel she had found in the estate library that she thought he might enjoy, because she remembered seeing him read similar ones on quiet afternoons. The first time he spoke properly to her in the hospital, he looked at her for a long moment and then said, "You stayed." "Of course I stayed," she said. "Folake and Kunle," he began, and then stopped. He looked at the window. "They are my children." "I know that." He paused again. "But there are different kinds of being there." She did not say anything. She understood what he meant without needing it explained. Over the following days, he began to ask about her life with a directness he had never used before. Not in a pitying way, not in the way people ask questions when they are performing interest, but in the way of someone who genuinely wanted to understand something they had overlooked for a long time. He asked about Samuel. He asked about Toby. When she told him about the mechanic shop, the dream that kept getting delayed, he asked how much it would take to start it properly. She told him a number that felt enormous to her. He nodded slowly and said nothing more about it that day. He came home 6 weeks after the storm. The estate felt different somehow. Smaller, maybe, or perhaps just more honestly itself. He walked more carefully and used a cane he had refused to touch before the stroke. He ate his full breakfast. He was quieter than before, and the quietness was not weakness. It was the quietness of a man sorting through things. One afternoon, sitting in the reading room where Amara had found him on the floor, he called her in and asked her to sit down. She hesitated, because in 15 years she had stood in this room many times but never sat in it. "Sit down, Amara," he said. She sat. He told her that he had spoken to his lawyer. He explained that he had made arrangements, not because of the night of the storm, or not only because of it, but because he had looked clearly at 15 years and seen what was there. He had set up a fund for Toby's shop, a proper amount, enough to rent a space, buy equipment, hire one assistant to start. There were no conditions attached to it. It was simply given. And for Amara, there was a provision in his estate that would ensure she never had to worry about rent or medical bills again. Not a fortune. Not something that would change the shape of her daily life dramatically, but something solid, something that said, this person mattered here, and that should be recognized. She sat very still while he explained all of this. You don't have to do this, she said, when he had finished. I know, he said. That is why I am doing it. She looked at her hands in her lap. She thought about Samuel, and the years of stretching a salary, and Toby's napkin sketch, and the floor of that reading room on a stormy night when everything had narrowed down to a single, necessary task. Thank you, she said. It was not enough, but it was the only thing there was. Foleke and Kunle were not pleased when the revised will came to their attention. Foleke called the estate 3 times in 1 week, her voice tight and controlled in the way of someone working very hard at not shouting. Kunle sent a formal letter through a lawyer of his own. The chief read both the calls and the letter with the same expression, a kind of tired, clear-eyed calm, and responded to both with the same answer. The decisions were made, they would not be changed. Amara heard about all of this secondhand, through the estate's small network of staff. She did not involve herself in it. It was not her business, and besides, she had other things to think about. Toby opened his shop 4 months later. It was a modest space on a busy road at the edge of town, clean and well-organized in the way that reflected his personality. On the day of the opening, he stood at the door and looked at the sign above it, the logo that matched the one on the old napkin, and then looked at his mother. You kept that napkin, he said. Obviously, she said. She still went to the chief's estate, but the nature of her visits had shifted in a way that was difficult to describe precisely. She no longer came as the woman whose job it was to maintain the surfaces of someone else's life. She came because she chose to. She came on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, and she brought pepper soup when she had made it, and she sat in the chairs instead of standing beside them, and the chief asked her opinion on things, and she gave it honestly, and sometimes he agreed and sometimes he did not, and they had learned, without ever making a formal arrangement of it, how to talk to each other like people. One Tuesday, sitting in the garden, while the last of the afternoon light came through the trees, the chief turned to her and said, You talked to me all night, you know. I heard more of it than you might think. I didn't know what else to do, she said. You told me about a bowl of pepper soup, he said, with something that was almost a smile. I told you I was proud of it, she said. That's still true. He nodded and looked back at the garden. It is very good soup, he said. They sat there a while longer, 2 people who had arrived at an honest friendship by the longest and most unlikely route, while the light went gold and then soft, and the evening settled gently around them both.